Let's go right now to Matthew Bryza. He's a former White House official. He was in the Obama administration. Talk to him about what's going on in LA as we've seen the President Donald Trump deploy the National Guard to quell apparently largely peaceful protests. They're always largely peaceful on the left, aren't they? Even when we've seen cars set on fire and the police being pelted with missiles. Very good afternoon to you, Matthew, and apologies for keeping you waiting so long.
My pleasure, Julia. I enjoyed listening.
It was lively. It's a very, very painful conversation, but what can we say? I mean, look, it's interesting. Gavin Newsom, the California governor, who's Democrat, he thinks he's going to be the next Democrat candidate for president next time round. He's sort of horrified, saying this is immoral for the president to send in the National Guard. He hasn't asked permission. Last time this was done was 60 years ago to protect civil rights campaigners in Alabama. But I mean, what's immoral about the president sending in law enforcement to enforce the law?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what law enforcement is supposed to do. What complicates the issue here, or sharpens the point, I should say, is that Los Angeles, like San Francisco, Chicago, my hometown, is considered a sanctuary city, which means that the local police, municipal police, won't help federal law enforcement agents enforce anti-migration measures.
So the local police in those Democrat-run strongholds will not enforce the law, which is the job of the police.
Yeah,
I mean, it is the law and has been for a very long time that you cannot be an illegal migrant in America.
Yeah, true. So there's a constitutional issue here, too, whereby the California state legislature passed a law a few years ago that said local law enforcement can't help federal law enforcement agents. So in the case of fighting migration, illegal migration. So that's a constitutional issue that needs to be resolved somehow.
I mean, it really, really does. I'm thinking this is a basic issue for law and order, and I still find it utterly fascinating that Gavin Newsom is elected as a governor in that state after the abject failings of what he did over lockdown and everything since. Those green, insane policies that are leading to so many businesses leaving, but also what is going on in terms of the opioid abuse on the streets and the shanty towns set up in LA and San Francisco and elsewhere. He's not in control of it. But certainly when it comes to basic law and order, in 2020 we saw the Black Lives Matter riots and massive disorder, huge damage to public property and private property. Terribly, whole black neighborhoods burnt down, black businesses burnt down, apparently in the pursuit of black rights by largely white Antifa activists. But it's quite clear these people they're basically opposed to what ICE are doing. This is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, but they are carrying out the law of the land, are they not? They are coming in, they're raiding workplaces known to have a large number of illegal migrant workers. They're seeing if you're undocumented and they're taking them away and they're going to be deported. That's not just the law of the land, it's a mandate from the American people, including having support from the majority of Democrat voters.
Yeah, I mean, 54% of Americans in most recent polls support these measures by the Trump administration to enforce immigration law. And there is a debate about, are there due process rights that illegally arriving migrants have in the United States? The Trump administration says no. Others argue yes, but I firmly agree with what you said, Julia, that these federal law enforcement agents have a duty and a responsibility to enforce the law. And, these decisions are unpopular, especially in these largely Mexican-American, Latino communities. And the protests are expressions of political views, and people have a right to express those views, but not when they become violent.
Yeah, but it is interesting because the Latino people of America, voters, gave a very strong endorsement, didn't they, in large numbers of Donald Trump, very much supportive of this, partly because also often they may be people who are on the bottom rung of the ladder as legal migrants, and actually they know the people who are most hurt by mass illegal immigration and undocumented workers who aren't being paid a fair rate because they've got no way of negotiating for it because they're not legally in the country, is actually people at the bottom end of the rung. California has 2.6 million undocumented migrants, and that is untenable.
It is untenable, and what you say is right. In my own experience with immigrant families, whether they be Eastern Europeans like my family or Latin Americans, it's true. The people who follow the rules and work their way up through society are very much against illegal migration or immigration. Absolutely true. In this case, I mean, there's a counter argument that in California, so many jobs that these migrants or illegal migrants do are not taken up by Americans. They do a lot of backbreaking labor,
because they don't pay enough.
Right,
We've
exactly
got the same
right.
thing here. But the only reason those jobs don't pay well is because they can get undocumented workers on the cheap. I mean, that's the thing. Mass immigration, legal and illegal, undermines the pay of people at the bottom of the pile.
It does, but also fights inflation. So a lot of U.S. economists were saying that with Trump, if he really does succeed in this big push to push out these illegal migrants, that we're going to see food prices increase, and that'll work against
when people are paid a living wage to do a job.
Yep.
I mean, that's the reality. But then there's also a huge cost to a lot of people who aren't a living wage, and there's a huge cost to criminality and the basic principle that you don't have a right to go and live in any sodding country you feel like it.
Yeah, that's true.
But a lot of people on your side, on the Democrat side, don't think that. They genuinely, like here in the UK, they genuinely think that, we should have open borders.
Yes, I know. Well, actually, I spent 4 years in George Bush's administration too, in the White House.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much a nonpartisan person. I'm a public servant. But it's true. There is a belief that, and it's against U.S. law. I began my career as a visa officer. Let me put it this way. So my first year in Poland, where my relatives came from, and they came to the U.S. to work. And it was legal back then. For me, it was heartbreaking to have to say to all these visa applicants who wanted to do what my grandparents did and put me in the position to become a U.S. diplomat that they can't do it. But that's the law. That's the law that Congress passed, and it has to be enforced.
Yep, there you go. It's that simple. Matthew Bryza, former White House official, saying the Obama and the George Bush administration. Sam Armstrong. It is extraordinary what's going on in America. We know we import an awful lot of their madness as well. But we had this in this country. We see it again and again. Two-tier justice and the attitude of the authorities to violence and very extreme violence and destruction of property on the streets by people who have certain political views and even pretty peaceful protests. I mean, genuinely peaceful protests by people who have the wrong views, treated very differently by the authorities and by the police, and subsequently in terms of the prosecution.
Yeah, you don't hear a pip out of the rule of law brigade when it comes to enforcing these laws. And my advice to the Democrats is this. Look, if you genuinely believe that the American people want to see years more mass migration, run for office, pass a bill, abolish migration laws, change America in that way. Tear down the walls, open up the doors, go back to the old days where if you turned up in New York on a boat, you could come into the country. If you want to do that, great. What I don't accept, whether it's here, there, wherever, is being too cowardly to make that issue a public one.
Yeah, if that's what you think, ask the public, and we'll give you our answer.
Otherwise, it is a subversion of our democracy, and I take that incredibly seriously because it's a quiet coup against the British people, the American people.
And it's not like, well, we never asked you. No. We've told you at every election. 2010 onwards, we've told you what we thought.
You promised us you were dealing with it.
You were dealing with it, yeah, exactly. But again, careful, we will be. I mean, I'm expecting to have the handcuffs somewhere. I'm going to be referred to prevent for virtually everything I've said today. And you lot too, watching and listening, they're coming after you too. You need to be re-educated and de-radicalised. But as I say, I think it's going to be quite good fun in the re-education camps. It's going to be all the best people.